This tutorial highlights a number of common mistakes and how to correct them. A very common mistake is using a multiple-choice checkbox format instead of a single-choice radio button. A checkbox will allow the respondent to select both answers. In this example, it would be more appropriate to use the radio format that only allows one selection. To correct, edit the line item. Use the Convert to facility to change the format from checkbox to radio. The checkbox format has been changed to a radio format. Likewise with grids, here again respondents can tick multiple boxes which would give confusing results. A more suitable format would be to use radio buttons. When using a radio grid, and if you want to make it a mandatory question, it is recommended that you include a no answer type option. To correct, edit the line item. Add a no comment, or similar, to the answer options. Then use the Convert to change the format to a radio grid. The grid is now ideally suited to the question. In this example, the single selection radio format has been used, that will prevent a respondent, who has traveled on more than one class, from answering correctly. For more accurate result data, it would be better to allow the respondent to check all the answer responses that applied to them. This time we use the Convert to change the format to a checkbox format. Care should be taken when making items mandatory. For example, when requesting comments, it is advisable not to set the question as mandatory, unless you really do require a response. In this example, the question and answer format appears okay, but if the question were to be made mandatory, it would not cater for a respondent who had not traveled. Adding a did not travel option will allow the question to remain mandatory, but also cater for the non-traveler. What might be a throwback to when surveys were conducted using printed surveys, there is often a tendency to use a numeric scale as a heading. When scales are used, they are often accompanied with information to allow the respondent to equate the scale to something tangible. For example, to determine if one is to be scored high or low. Although there is nothing inherently wrong with using a scale, it is adding a level of interpretation that in most cases is unnecessary. With an online survey, better results would be obtained if the scale is dispensed with and clear headings used instead, so that there can be no question that the scale has been misunderstood. In addition, if making the question mandatory, it would be better to add a no comment type answer option. If it is important that a numeric response is collated, it would be better to use Survey Galaxy's scoring facility that allows scores to be assigned to each heading. Here is an example of a radio grid being configured to appear as a single-choice radio format. Visually, it looks okay, but if the question was made mandatory and a respondent was to try to complete the survey, they would be forced to check every response if they wanted to complete the survey. In reality, this layout is not one question, but 6 questions, each with only one available answer, that must be selected. The only way to correct this problem is to delete the item, and add a new item using the non-grid radio format, as is shown below. That is the end of this tutorial.